Listen, I have been a Kyle Shanahan guy for quite some time. I think he's one of the smartest offensive minds in the National Football League. You could say, well, the talent in San Francisco. We've seen plenty of teams that has the talent of San Francisco, or at least close to it. We saw what with Philadelphia last year. They just collapsed in the second half of the season, really the last quarter of the season. You've never seen a collapse by San Francisco with a fully healthy roster. Coaching does matter, and Shanahan's done a great job. Here's the problem. There's a bit of the Mike Tyson quote with this football team. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best planners. Like, don't we all know this person in life? The person who gets everything lined up, the person who puts the countless time, effort, and energy to figure out what the best course of action is, and they're absolutely the best at it. But if one thing goes wrong, if the fit hits the shan, they fall apart. That they are a mess after that. That feels like Kyle Shanahan. I've alluded to it all season long. I think at this point, it's kind of come to a little bit of a crescendo with San Francisco being 5-6 and losing the way that they lost yesterday. Listen, they weren't supposed to be Green Bay. They're just not. It's the way they lost. Folks, how does Jordan Mason get 3 carries? I get they trailed throughout, but early in the fourth quarter, folks, that was a 2-score game. Like, the Niners, in theory, could have still won that game. Put together one scoring drive, 7-point game. All of a sudden, if Green Bay, a game you're supposed to win via route the way they did, all of a sudden now there's pressure. Not to say Brandon Allen isn't at fault, because Brandon Allen is a backup. Like, you saw that from yesterday. Brandon Allen's a backup quarterback. If he can't make it work in the Shanahan offense, not sure what's going to work. Should have started Joshua Dobbs, as far as I'm concerned, but that's another mistake by Kyle. Is that Kyle is among the great coaches in the NFL. And I don't think one bad season does not a bad head coach make. If Kyle does this next year, if he doesn't adjust next year, then we're going to have to start having a conversation. But among the great coaches, which Kyle's still that, absolutely. Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin. I think Dan Campbell is objectively a great coach. He's put himself undoubtedly in that discussion. Sean Payton, who I'm going to talk about later in the show, has done an amazing job with Bo Nix. Great coaches. No coach among that group is more loyal. An optimist would say loyal. A detractor would say rigid, depending on how you look at it, to his playbook than Kyle Shanahan. Come hell or high water, I'm going to roll with the plays that got me here. Which, to a certain degree, it's like, well, if it's worked for you recently, maybe it'll work this week. But when the NFL what makes the NFL so great is that each chapter is different than the last. You never know. That's what makes it the greatest league, professional sports league in America. You don't know what you're going to get from week-to-week basis. We didn't know that the Titans were going to come in and upset Houston. We didn't know that the Dallas-Washington game was getting the way that it did, with Dallas as a double-digit underdog. Wait, that's what makes the NFL great. Each game is its own different story. So you can't use the plot of the last story to necessarily. You can use it to help you maybe a little bit from an identity and character standpoint, particularly for the morale of the locker room, not necessarily for a play sheet. And that's what Kyle Shanahan has gotten into the habit of doing as of late. The fact of the matter is this, is that this year for San Francisco, excuse me, they've blown 10. Sorry, let me rephrase that. They've blown 3 games this year in which they led by double digits in the fourth quarter. The Rams game, led by double digits, collapsed in the end. Okay? I think it was the Cardinals game. Yeah, the Cardinals game, led by double digits, collapsed in the end. And then the last game of which, I think it was Seattle? Was it Seattle? No, I'm sorry. It was Seattle. They were up double digits on Dallas. Could have easily lost that game if Dak and CD are able to make one more play, which, they were able to do to get them in the game originally. This has just been an abject failure on not a historic level, but a level that is not common. Now, some of this is on the 49ers players. Some of this on the fact that Deebo Samuel is a shell of himself. The drop on the interception. Brandon Allen had a bad game. It's Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen, third quarter, delivers a throw on a rope into tight coverage to Deebo Samuel. Goes right through his hands. Pick to guess who? Xavier McKinney, who's had a lot of those this year. Takes it back the other way and it puts Green Bay in position to kind of run away with it. So Debo's not the same player he used to be. Christian McCaffrey, I don't think this year's like a referendum on McCaffrey. I'm not 100% sure he's totally healthy still. He could have very easily rushed back from injury. There was internet doctors thought he'd be out for the year. Maybe they had some credibility. I don't know what's going on with Christian McCaffrey's body. If it's just a matter of, hey, he's rusty. He hasn't played up until a few weeks ago since February. It's since the Super Bowl. So maybe that's got something to do with it. I'm not sure. But there is a level of, okay, rusty or injured. McCaffrey's not the same. They give Jordan Mason some more carries. By the way, Garendo, the kid who played really well against Dallas when Mason got hurt, give him some carries. Like, that's what I've always given Shanahan a ton of love for. There's no coach that I've seen in the modern NFL that can develop run concepts and schemes better than Kyle Shanahan. Like, that's what I remember when the Niners traded for Christian McCaffrey 2 years ago. And people are like, oh, man, they gave up way too much. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You're putting Christian McCaffrey in the Shanahan offense? This guy's going to be unbelievable. And he has been. Up until this year with the injuries and whatnot, he's been unbelievable. Why not use the other guys you have? Jordan Mason, there was a point in time Jordan Mason was leading the league in rushing. Isaac Garendo showed some flashes against the Dallas Cowboys on that Sunday Night Football game about a month ago. Like, you've still got pieces you're able to use. Like, that's why I say about San Francisco, why I've said that's the best roster in football. This is why I said a year ago when it was like, look at Purdy's numbers compared to Dak and Lamar. I'm like, I'd sure hope so. With those, are you kidding me? Basically fully healthy, start to finish. Ayuk and Debo when he can still play, and Kittle and McCaffrey and Juwan Jennings and yes and that, and I sure hope you could. This year, it's just not the same team. Some of it's injury. Some of this is out of Kyle Shanahan's control, and some of this is bad situational management. And by the way, I've defended Kyle for years. Hasn't that always been the number one knock on Kyle? He can't finish games late. Super Bowls in particular. Offensive coordinator Atlanta, when the Falcons infamously blew the 25-point lead to Brady. He was the head coach of the Niners when they had a 10-point lead in Kansas City. I've defended him for that one because in my mindset, it's like, he got Jimmy Garoppolo to a 10-point lead over Mahomes. Hey, give that man a round of applause. That's unbelievable. And by the way, arguably the play of the game, Jimmy Garoppolo, Debo to Debo Samuel. Or sorry, not Debo Samuel, to Emmanuel Sanders. Good play design by Kyle Shanahan. The right call against the right defense. Garoppolo just missed the throw. Right, so I didn't give him flack for that. A lot of folks did, I did not. And then the next Super Bowl gets Kansas City, blown double-digit lead to the Chiefs in the second half of that game. Didn't really rip him for that because I thought he was aggressive in that game. I didn't have an issue, but that has been the knock. And this year, multiple double-digit leads blown for San Francisco. There's a lack of an adjustment with the Niners. There's not using certain players when they can be key contributors for you when we have a very, very deep running back room. When McCaffrey's trying to work himself back into the mix, you still have George Kittle. You still have Ricky Pearsall. You still have Juwan Jennings. You still have pieces there. And they're just not using them. And Purdy, his greatest strength, I've been critical of Purdy in the past. Purdy's greatest strength, in my opinion, is great distributor. He knows where to get the ball, knows where to get it on time, on target. He knows what he's doing. But he's in large part been forced to scramble because of, in some cases, bad play calling, poor protection up front. And so I think the Niners are dead. I think their season is over. All those things I just mentioned, combined with the fact they go to Buffalo next week with the Bills off a bye, host the Bears, host the Rams, go to Miami, host Detroit, go to Arizona. Not a lot of, I'm not saying they're going to go winless or anything. They'll beat the Bears. They'll probably beat the Dolphins. But you're seeing down the stretch here, I'm not seeing, as tight as the NFC West is, separated one and number 1, number 4 in that division by a single game. I'm not seeing a whole lot of W's for this football team right now, folks. I'm just not. And a lot of this falls on Kyle. And so, listen, now I'll also say this in defense of Kyle. People are like, the Niners need to fire. Huh? He will automatically go to the most sought-after coach in the market. You got Belichick, who I think would be a poor hire for most teams. Vrabel, who I love. Ben Johnson, I'm a huge fan of. Kyle's getting more interviews than all of those guys. He'll be picked up the next day. It's like when remember when the Eagles fired Andy Reid and he was the Chiefs coach like 2 seconds later? Like that's the type of situation. And Andy Reid didn't have a ring at that point. Andy Reid had a reputation quite similar to Kyle Shanahan. Loosened up double-digit leads, could win the big game, all the above. Didn't have the quarterbacks that were to the level of a Brady, a Peyton Manning, a Big Ben, a Drew Brees. And so that's Kyle can maybe turn his career around. I should say turn his career around. He's been very successful, but get to that Andy Reid stratosphere potentially, maybe with the change of scenery. But all I know is this season for the Niners, it's lost. It's over. They're done. They're not winning the division. I don't care how tight it is. They're playing the worst football of anybody in the NFC West. They're beat up, and Kyle Shanahan has done the worst job he's done as the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. I don't think there's any question about that. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.